I found a thong in my husband's glove compartment. Bright red. Lace. Not mine. My hands shook as I held it up. My stomach dropped. My heart pounded so hard I could barely breathe. I didn't scream. I didn't cry. I just sat there, frozen, staring at this tiny piece of fabric that shattered my whole world. We had been married for 9 years. 9 damn years. And this felt like a slap in the face. But that wasn't the worst part. The worst part came when I asked him about it. And he laughed. He laughed. I don't know, maybe it's one of yours, he said, turning back to the TV like I was bothering him. That's when I knew. This wasn't just some one-time thing. This was deeper. Dirtier. Ongoing. I was about to find out just how far it had gone. And just how much I didn't know the man I had married. The silence between us that night was suffocating. I lay in bed, eyes wide open, staring at the ceiling fan spinning in slow, lazy circles as if mocking the chaos inside my mind. Ethan, my husband, slept beside me like nothing was wrong. Like he hadn't just thrown a hand grenade into the heart of our marriage and walked away whistling. I didn't sleep a minute. I kept replaying the moment over and over again, the feel of the lace in my fingers, the look on his face when I confronted him, that smirk, that damn laugh. I wanted to scream. I wanted to shake him awake and demand the truth, but I knew better. If I pushed too hard, he'd just lie. That's what cheaters do. They lie until there's no truth left at all. The next morning, I watched him put on his tie, sip his coffee, kiss my cheek like everything was perfectly normal. I had to fight every instinct in my body not to throw the mug at his head. Instead, I smiled. I played the role of the doting wife. Because I needed time. I needed proof. And most of all, I needed to know who she was. Because there was no doubt in my mind now, there was a she. Women's underwear doesn't just materialize in a married man's car without a name attached to it. I was going to find out hers. I started with the basics. His phone? Locked. His laptop? Password protected. But I knew Ethan. I knew he wasn't tech-savvy. And I knew his passwords were always stupidly simple: sports teams, birthdays, random phrases from old movies. After 2 tries, I was in. His email was boring. His texts were worse, scrubbed clean, clearly deleted. But it was the Uber receipts that caught my eye. Multiple rides to the same downtown address. Midday. Weekdays. Always returning 2 to 3 hours later. I Googled the address. It wasn't a hotel. It wasn't a restaurant. It was an apartment building. I felt cold all over. I copied the address and waited. That Friday, he left for a meeting. He wore his blue dress shirt, the one he always wore when he wanted to look extra sharp. I didn't say a word. Just smiled, kissed his cheek again, and watched him leave. 10 minutes later, I was in my car, following the little blue dot on my phone. When he got there, I parked half a block away and waited, crouched low, heart pounding so loud I could hear it in my ears. I watched him walk up to the building, ring the buzzer, and wait. Then the door opened. And there she was. Young. Blonde. Laughing. She threw her arms around his neck and kissed him. On the mouth. I thought I was going to throw up. But I didn't. I took a picture. Then another. And another. Because this wasn't just betrayal. This was war. I didn't go home right away. I couldn't. I drove until the city blurred into trees and strip malls and endless flat roads. My hands were clenched on the steering wheel so tight they turned white. My phone buzzed once. Ethan. I let it ring. I didn't want to hear his voice. I didn't want to hear another lie dressed up in charm and casual shrugs. Instead, I pulled into the parking lot of some random gas station, shut off the engine, and stared out the windshield. For a long time, I didn't move. I just sat there with the photos open on my phone. Photo 1. Ethan waiting at the door. Photo 2, her arms around his neck. Photo 3, the kiss. Photo 4, them disappearing inside, the door closing behind them. For frames. For pieces of evidence that my entire life had been built on a goddamn lie. It wasn't just the cheating. It was the years. The memories. The anniversaries. The vacations. The talks about kids. About retirement. About growing old together. All of it tainted. Spoiled by her. I didn't know her name yet, but she already had a face in my mind. The face of the woman who smiled as she destroyed my life. And Ethan, he looked happy. He looked more relaxed with her than I'd seen him in months. Maybe years. That hurt more than I could admit to myself. Had I been that easy to replace? That disposable? Just another chapter he closed without warning? By the time I got home, it was nearly dark. Ethan was already back, sitting on the couch, sipping a beer, flipping through channels like it was just another Friday night. I stood there in the doorway, watching him, wanting to scream, wanting to cry, wanting to throw everything we owned at his smug, oblivious face. But I didn't. Not yet. I wasn't ready to burn it all down until I knew everything. I needed to know who she was. How long it had been going on. What she had that I didn't. Because yes, I blamed him, but I also blamed her. The one who knew he was married and didn't care. The one who opened her door and her legs and smiled like she was winning something that didn't belong to her. Later that night, I went into the bathroom and locked the door. I opened Instagram and started scrolling through his followers. She had to be there. Guys like Ethan don't keep secrets well. And then I saw her, Madison Clark. Blonde. Big eyes. Perfect teeth. Smiling in every picture like she'd never felt a moment of regret in her entire perfect little life. Her page wasn't private. Of course it wasn't. Women like that want to be seen. Her captions made me sick, quotes about empowerment and love and finding joy in the little things. One post from 2 weeks ago had a picture of a man's hand on her waist, cropped just enough to hide his face. But I knew that hand. I'd held it every day for 9 years. I'd worn the ring he put on that hand. I stared at the photo, fingers trembling, heart racing. Then I hit save. I had everything I needed. Now it was time to burn it all down. The next morning, I woke up with a clarity I hadn't felt in weeks. It was like something inside me had finally clicked into place. No more crying in the shower. No more pretending everything was fine. No more fake smiles over coffee and dead-eyed stares across the dinner table. I had proof. I had a name. And now I had a plan. Ethan had no idea that the woman he kissed behind my back was about to become the wrecking ball to his precious little illusion. He thought he could cheat quietly. He thought I'd never find out. He thought I was stupid. That was his first mistake. His second mistake? Underestimating what a woman scorned is capable of. I didn't confront him right away. I played the long game. I was polite. Sweet, even. I laughed at his jokes. I brought him his coffee in the mornings. I kissed him goodnight. And all the while, I was collecting. I took screenshots of every photo Madison posted. I saved every email Ethan sent from his laptop when he forgot to log out. I tracked his Uber receipts. I even went as far as recording one of their phone calls, his voice low and stupidly tender, hers all breathy giggles and fake affection. "I can't wait to see you again," he said. "I miss you already." I pressed stop on the recording and smiled. He didn't know it yet, but I was building a bomb. And when it exploded, it would destroy everything he thought he had control over. The breaking point came one evening when we were having dinner with his parents. His mom, a woman who once told me I was the best thing that ever happened to her son, kept going on about how lucky Ethan was to have such a loyal, loving wife. I could barely stomach my food. Ethan smiled, nodded, held my hand under the table. And I realized then he wasn't just lying to me. He was lying to everyone. His family. Our friends. The whole world thought we were perfect. That was the mask he wore. The good husband. The dependable man. The trustworthy partner. And underneath? Just rot. That night, I sat in the guest room and made a private Instagram account. I uploaded every photo I had. The red thong. The apartment building. The cropped hand on Madison's waist. The kiss. I wrote a caption that was cold, sharp, and brutal. "When your husband says he's working late, he's really working this." No names. Just tags. I tagged Madison. I tagged Ethan. I tagged every mutual friend we had. And then I waited. I didn't have to wait long. The next morning, all hell broke loose. My phone blew up with messages, some from friends, some from strangers. Some calling me brave. Others telling me I was crazy. Ethan called 12 times. I didn't answer. He came home early, face pale, eyes wild, holding his phone like it was a ticking bomb. "What the hell is this, Rachel?" he shouted. "Are you out of your mind?" I stood there, calm as ever, arms crossed. "No, Ethan. I'm not out of my mind. I'm out of patience." He tried to deny it. Of course he did. "It's not what it looks like," he said. The most pathetic line a cheater can say. I laughed. I laughed so hard it scared him. I showed him the photos. The receipts. The messages. The recordings. I showed him the truth. And then I handed him a manila envelope with the divorce papers already signed. His jaw dropped. I didn't wait for a response. I turned around, walked upstairs, and slammed the door behind me. He didn't leave right away. That surprised me. I thought after the explosion, after the reveal, after the public shaming, he'd grab a bag, run straight into Madison's arms, and vanish. But instead, Ethan just crumbled. For the first time in years, I saw fear in his eyes. Real fear. Not annoyance, not arrogance, not the slick mask of a man who thought he was too clever to get caught. Fear. He sat on the edge of the bed, rubbing his temples like he was trying to wake up from a nightmare. "I didn't mean for it to go this far," he muttered. "It was just supposed to be fun. Just a distraction." That word, distraction, hit me like a punch in the gut. 9 years of marriage. 9 years of loyalty, sacrifice, shared dreams, and I was just something to be distracted from. I didn't scream. I didn't throw anything. I just stared at him until he couldn't look me in the eye anymore. He kept talking, rambling, trying to explain. Said Madison meant nothing. Said it was just sex. Said it was a mistake. A moment of weakness. But I knew better. I'd seen the messages. The photos. The way he looked at her. The tenderness in his voice when he spoke to her. You don't give someone 2 years of your life because yes, that's how long it had been if they mean nothing. You don't hide phone calls, sneak off to someone's apartment during work hours, buy them gifts, and take them to restaurants you never once took your own wife to if it's just fun. No. This was a second life. A secret world he built piece by piece behind my back while I was out here keeping everything else together, paying the bills, cooking the meals, remembering his mother's birthday, hosting holidays, planning anniversaries he forgot. He begged me not to go public. That was rich considering I already had. He said it would ruin him, his job, his reputation, his relationships. He looked like a desperate man clawing at the edge of a cliff, and I realized something awful in that moment. He cared more about losing his image than losing me. That was the final nail in the coffin. Whatever part of me still held out hope that maybe, deep down, he regretted what he'd done, it died right then and there. I gave him 2 days to move out. That was generous. He packed his things in silence, dragging boxes out to his car like a ghost. I didn't help. I didn't even offer him a glass of water. Every time he tried to talk, I held up a hand and walked away. He didn't deserve my words anymore. He didn't deserve anything from me. Not after what he did. Not after the way he let that woman, the woman who smiled in selfies and called herself a believer in fate, slither into our lives and rot it from the inside out. On the second night, while he was finishing up in the garage, I heard his phone buzz on the kitchen counter. I shouldn't have looked. But I did. One last time. And there it was. A message from Madison. Did she calm down yet? We should celebrate once she's gone, kiss Mark. No remorse. No shame. Just celebration. I left the message open on the screen, placed the phone gently back down, and walked upstairs with a calmness I didn't even recognize in myself. I was done being the victim. I was done being quiet. I was done being the woman who let people walk all over her while she pretended everything was fine. Ethan and Madison had made their bed. Now they could lie in it together. In hell. The silence in the house after Ethan left was a different kind of loud. Not empty, not lonely, freeing. For the first time in years, I didn't have to tiptoe around someone else's moods, hide my own pain behind polite smiles, or pretend that love still lived between walls it had long abandoned. The space he left behind wasn't a void, it was a beginning. A raw, aching beginning, yes, but mine. I didn't cry when I closed the door behind him. I didn't crumble when his car disappeared down the street. I stood there for a while, just breathing, like I hadn't allowed myself to do in years. Deep, full, unafraid. But I wasn't naive. I knew the fallout hadn't even fully started yet. The Instagram post I had made? It spread like wildfire. Within hours, Madison's curated, sunlit fantasy life had cracked apart. Her comments were flooded. Her followers turned on her faster than a switchblade, some with disgust, others with morbid curiosity. And then there were the women. Women I didn't know. Women who sent me messages. Screenshots. Names. One woman from Ethan's office messaged me directly. Her name was Kara. She said she wasn't trying to be messy, but that she thought I deserved to know. Apparently, Madison hadn't been Ethan's first. Not even close. Kara wrote, I always thought it was weird how Ethan flirted with the interns. I assumed it was just harmless, but now I wonder. Madison's not the only one. She's just the one he didn't bother hiding. I stared at the message for a long time. My stomach turned. I thought the wound couldn't go deeper, but it did. Suddenly, Madison wasn't the story, she was just the latest chapter in a long, disgusting novel I had never been allowed to read. I didn't respond to Kara. I didn't need to. The damage was done. Ethan had been rotting for far longer than I realized. He hadn't just betrayed me with one woman, he'd built a life on betrayal, one lie layered over another like mold under paint. And I had been sleeping next to that decay night after night, believing it was love. I took a long, hot shower that night. Washed my skin until it burned. Scrubbed the smell of him from my body. Scrubbed so hard I cried, not because I missed him, but because I had stayed. Because I had given him every part of me even when my gut told me something was wrong. Because I had believed in him longer than he ever deserved. The grief wasn't for losing him, it was for losing myself in a marriage that only I was fighting to keep alive. The next morning I blocked Ethan on everything. Phone. Email. Social media? I didn't want to see his face. I didn't want to hear another apology, another excuse, another plea for understanding. I'd already understood enough. I'd understood how a man could split himself in two and leave the version he didn't like rotting in the basement of his own soul. I had seen what it looked like when love turns into obligation, when passion turns into performance, when loyalty is mocked behind closed doors. I was done playing the fool. But Madison? She wasn't done. Because 2 days later I got a DM from her. Not an apology. Not remorse. But a warning. If you think you can ruin my life and walk away clean, you're wrong. You have no idea what he told me about you. And just like that I knew it wasn't over. It was only just beginning. I stared at Madison's message for a long time, my thumb hovering over the screen, heartbeat slowing into a cold, steady rhythm. The nerve of her. The audacity. She wasn't sorry. She wasn't even embarrassed. No, she was trying to twist the knife as if I hadn't already bled out on the floor of this wrecked marriage. I didn't reply. I wouldn't give her that satisfaction. But her words echoed in my mind like poison. You have no idea what he told me about you. And suddenly I did wonder. What kind of story had Ethan fed her to make her feel so entitled, so righteous, so blameless in the mess she helped create? Did he tell her I was cold? Controlling? That our marriage had been dead for years and she was simply his rescue from the ruins? I could see it now, the way he probably leaned into her ear and whispered lies about his unhappy life, painting himself as a victim while I played the role of the boring, nagging wife who just didn't understand him anymore. And she, young, bright-eyed, naivated up like candy. Because men like Ethan know how to tell stories. They know how to make themselves sound wounded, romantic, trapped. And women like Madison? They love the fantasy of being the savior. The special one. The one he'd risk it all for. I almost pitied her. Almost. But then I remembered the message. The smugness. The threat. No, Madison wasn't innocent. She was fully complicit. And now that the fairy tale had cracked and reality was seeping through, she was lashing out. She wanted someone to blame for her sudden fall from grace. And it sure as hell wasn't going to be Ethan. She wanted war? She had no idea who she was dealing with. I went digging. I found her LinkedIn profile. Her old college articles. A YouTube channel she hadn't updated in a while, full of chirpy videos about self-care and finding your truth. Hypocrisy in high definition. I even found her old resume buried in a forum post with a list of internships and employers. And then finally I found what I needed, her boss's name. A woman. A woman who, based on her public profile, didn't play games and certainly didn't seem the type to tolerate office affairs that spilled into public scandal. I sent her a polite, carefully written email. I included links, screenshots, a summary of the situation with zero emotion, just cold facts. I didn't embellish. I didn't rage. I simply laid it out like a professional concerned citizen would, highlighting the conflict of interest, the workplace violations, the public fallout. I didn't ask for her to be fired. I didn't need to. Once the match is lit, you don't have to push the fire. It moves on its own. Within 24 hours, Madison's Instagram vanished. A day later, someone from her office anonymously confirmed she had been put on indefinite leave. And just like that, the golden girl with the perfect smile had fallen. But if you think that brought me peace, you'd be wrong. Because revenge isn't a bomb. It's a razor. And the deeper you push it, the more you cut yourself too. Still, I wasn't done. There was one more person who needed to feel what I felt. His name was Thomas. Madison's ex-fiancé. The man she left 6 months before her affair with Ethan began. Yeah. I found him too. And he was ready to talk. Finding Thomas wasn't hard. People leave digital footprints everywhere, and Madison, in all her curated confidence, had left enough breadcrumbs for me to trace him with disturbing ease. A few mutual follows, a tagged birthday post from 2 years ago, a photo she forgot to delete of them smiling together in a vineyard, his arm around her shoulders, hers around his waist, both of them looking so in love it made my stomach churn. I clicked through to his profile. Private. But his bio had an email for inquiries. He was a freelance photographer now based out of Charlotte. I stared at the email for a good hour before writing anything. I didn't know what I was hoping for. Closure? Solidarity? Vengeance? Maybe all three. Maybe none. My message was short, honest, and laced with pain. Hi Thomas, I know this is coming out of nowhere, but I think we've both been burned by the same person. My name is Rachel, and until recently I was married to Ethan, the man Madison's been seeing behind my back. I believe you were once engaged to her. I'm not reaching out to cause drama. I just thought you deserved the truth in case you never got it. I can send proof. If you don't want to be involved, I'll respect that. I expected silence. Or maybe a cold, one-line reply. What I didn't expect was a phone call just an hour later. His voice was calm, deep, but there was something hollow in it, like someone who'd lived through fire and come out on the other side, still smoking. I figured someone would reach out one day, he said. I just didn't think it'd be another one of her casualties. That phrase, her casualties, it stuck with me. We talked for almost 2 hours. Thomas told me everything. How they'd been together for nearly 5 years. How they were supposed to get married last spring. How, out of nowhere, Madison started pulling away, canceling wedding plans, talking about how she needed space to figure herself out. And then one night, without warning, she packed up her things, left the ring on the counter, and moved out. No cheating confession. No affair mentioned. Just a clean break that left him gutted and confused. And now I know why he said bitterly. She didn't need space. She needed a new distraction. We swapped details. Compared timelines. It all lined up too perfectly. While I was planning our 9th anniversary, she was ending her engagement. While Ethan was telling me he was just stressed from work, he was texting her from hotel rooms. And while Thomas was trying to rebuild his life from the ruins of a wedding that never happened, she was already wrapping herself around someone else's husband like a vine on a dying tree. There was a strange comfort in talking to him, like finding another survivor after a shipwreck. We didn't try to fix each other. We didn't try to make sense of it. We just shared the wreckage, piece by piece, and let the weight of the truth sit between us like a third presence. Before we hung up, he said something I'll never forget. You didn't deserve this. Neither did I. But at least now we know what kind of people they are. And maybe that's the only closure we'll ever get. He was right. I wasn't going to get an apology from Ethan. Madison wasn't going to have some tearful epiphany and beg for forgiveness. And I wasn't going to wake up one day and feel whole again like none of this happened. But I had truth now. And truth, no matter how ugly, is still power. I'd finally stepped out of the darkness. But just when I thought the storm was over, something unexpected happened. Ethan came back, with tears in his eyes, and a ring in his hand. He showed up on a Sunday afternoon unannounced. I was folding laundry in silence, trying to find pieces of a new routine in a house that still smelled faintly like him when the doorbell rang. I thought it was a delivery. Maybe a neighbor. The last person I expected to see on my front porch was Ethan, hair a mess, eyes red-rimmed, standing like a boy who'd been caught stealing from the cookie jar, not a grown man who detonated our marriage. He looked smaller. Not physically, but in presence. Like someone had drained the arrogance right out of him and left behind this hollowed-out, trembling shell. In his hand, of all things, was a ring box. My breath caught for a moment. Not because I still had feelings, those had been scorched to ash, but because of the sheer insanity of it. What the hell are you doing here? I asked, not moving from behind the door. He blinked. Swallowed hard. Can I come in? Just 5 minutes. Please. Every cell in my body screamed no. But curiosity, the part of me that needed to see just how far this man had fallen, won out. I stepped aside, arms crossed tightly, jaw clenched. He walked in like he was walking into a courtroom, cautious, quiet, almost reverent. He looked around the living room like he didn't recognize it anymore. Like it wasn't his life he'd scorched. I made a mistake, he said after a pause. A huge one. I laughed. I couldn't help it. No shit. He flinched like the words were sharper than expected. I know I don't deserve forgiveness. I know I ruined everything. But I didn't realize what I had until I lost it. Madison, she wasn't who I thought she was. She used me. Manipulated me. Told me you were the problem. That you didn't care. She lied to me. I stared at him, eyebrows raised. You think she lied to you? Ethan, you lied to me for 2 years. 2 freaking years. You went to her apartment, told her stories about me, let her believe I was some kind of monster, and now you want to stand here and act like you were the victim. He opened the ring box. It wasn't a new ring. It was my ring. The one I had taken off the night I found the thong. The one I left on his nightstand as a silent declaration that I was done. I want to fix things, he whispered. Please. Just tell me what to do. I stepped back like the box itself was toxic. You want to fix things? I said, voice shaking now, but not from sadness. From rage. From disbelief. You want to rewind time, erase everything you did, pretend Madison was just a bad dream? Newsflash, Ethan, she wasn't a dream. She was your choice. Over and over again. While I cooked dinner, while I waited for you to come home, while I planned our anniversary trip, you were choosing her. And now that the fantasy blew up in your face, you want to come crawling back. I didn't know how lost I was, he said, stepping forward. I didn't realize how much I loved you until, No, I cut him off. You didn't love me. You loved the security of me. You loved that I held your life together while you played games in the shadows. You loved having someone loyal while you weren't. But love? Love is honesty, loyalty, sacrifice, and you gave all that to someone who didn't even bother to hide her fangs. He closed the ring box slowly, lips pressed into a thin line. I could see it in his eyes, he still didn't fully get it. He thought this was a movie. That if he just showed up with the right words, the right tears, the right amount of regret, I'd fall into his arms and everything would be fine. But this wasn't a movie. This was my life now. And I was rewriting the damn script. I'm not your backup plan, I said quietly. I'm not your safety net. I'm not the woman who waits in the wings while you finish screwing up. His face crumpled, but I didn't flinch. I deserve better, I said. And I'm finally ready to live like I believe it. I opened the door. Goodbye, Ethan? He didn't argue. He just walked out. For the last time. After he left, the silence didn't feel victorious. It didn't feel satisfying. It felt real, heavy, like closing the last page of a book you never wanted to be part of in the first place. I locked the door behind him, not out of fear, but finality. There was no part of me that wanted to look back. No corner of my heart still clinging to what if or maybe someday. The kind of betrayal Ethan delivered wasn't something you recovered from with time or therapy or some rom-com epiphany. It was a wound that changed your entire bloodstream. And even if it stopped bleeding, it still shaped the way you walked forever. The next few weeks were a strange blend of calm and chaos. My phone quieted. The gossip around the Instagram post began to fade. People found new drama to devour, new lives to dissect. Madison had gone radio silent. No new photos. No smiling brunch selfies. Just digital dust where she used to beam about finding herself and chasing love. I could have danced on her digital grave. I could have posted follow-ups, exposed more dirt, twisted the knife deeper. But I didn't. Not because she didn't deserve it, but because I didn't deserve to carry her weight anymore. She wasn't mine to deal with. Not anymore. Ethan tried one last time, an email titled Foreclosure. I didn't open it. I archived it, dragged it into a folder marked Dead Ends, and moved on. He had his closure the day I shut the door in his face. Anything else was just noise. A man like Ethan didn't want to heal. He wanted to rewrite the narrative, make himself look less monstrous in the story of my pain. But I wouldn't let him edit my truth. Not anymore. One night, about a month later, I went out to dinner alone. It was a little Italian place I always wanted to try but never did because Ethan hated pretentious pasta. I sat by the window, ordered wine, and read a book between courses. No one stared. No one pitied me. I was just a woman eating alone, living on her own terms. And that's when I realized how long it had been since I felt safe. Not physically, but emotionally. Spiritually. To sit in silence without suspicion, without performing, without worrying if my world was being cracked open behind my back. The waitress came by with dessert. I hesitated. Then I ordered the tiramisu. Because I wanted it. Because I deserved it. There was a freedom in that moment, a quiet, powerful rebellion against all the small ways I'd been trained to accommodate someone else's chaos. I used to live in a constant state of bracing. Bracing for lies. For absences. For emotional whiplash masked as love. And now? I was breathing again. The tiramisu arrived, light and perfect. I took a bite and smiled to myself. That's when I felt it, not happiness exactly, but peace. A peace I built from ashes. A peace that didn't need anyone else's permission to exist. And somewhere deep inside me, I knew this wasn't just the end of a chapter. It was the beginning of a whole new book. And this time I was the one holding the pen. But healing isn't a straight road. It's not some neat little line from heartbreak to wholeness. It's messy. It spirals. It loops back on itself when you least expect it. There were days I felt empowered, almost euphoric, redecorating the bedroom, repainting the walls, reclaiming every inch of the space Ethan had once infected with his lies. But then there were nights when something stupid, a familiar scent in a store aisle, a couple arguing softly in the car next to mine, a song we once danced to, would hit me like a sucker punch. And I'd remember. Not because I missed him, but because I was still mourning the version of him I had invented in my head. The man I thought I married. The man I used to believe would never be capable of what he'd done. That's the cruelest part of betrayal. It's not just the other person you lose. It's the you who loved them too. I spent hours journaling. Not for some self-help Instagram aesthetic, but for survival. I needed to spill it somewhere. The anger. The disgust. The grief. The shame, yes, the shame, because even after everything, a small voice still whispered that maybe I should have seen the signs. Maybe I should have been enough. That voice? It was a liar. A ghost Ethan left behind to haunt the empty rooms of my self-worth. And every time I wrote, I chased it out. word by word, line by line, until my truth drowned out his fiction. One afternoon I ran into a friend of Ethan's. A guy named Trevor who used to come over during football season, drink too much beer, and fall asleep on our couch. He looked uncomfortable when he saw me, like he wasn't sure if he was supposed to say hello or cross the street. I gave him a tight smile, trying to move past him, but he stopped me with one sentence I'll never forget. "I always wondered why you stayed with him." I blinked, stunned. "Excuse me." Trevor shifted awkwardly, scratching the back of his neck. "I mean, it's none of my business. But even before Madison, Ethan was, let's just say he wasn't the guy he pretended to be." I never said anything. "Figured you knew." I guess I was wrong. That night, I sat in my car for an hour, hands on the steering wheel, replaying Trevor's words. I guess I was wrong. No, I was wrong. I had given Ethan so much credit. I had defended him, justified his distance, painted over red flags with prettier colors. I didn't just fall for a man. I fell for an illusion, a projection. And I had helped build it with my own hope, my own loyalty, my own refusal to see what was standing right in front of me. It hurt like hell to admit that, but it also set me free. Because once you stop romanticizing your pain, you can finally start healing from it. And slowly, painfully, beautifully, I did. I started going to yoga. I went back to school. I made new friends, real ones, who didn't know me as Ethan's wife, but just Rachel. I even got a dog, something Ethan always said we were too busy for. His name was Jasper, and he loved me in the simple, honest way only animals can. No games, no lies, just joy. And somewhere along the journey, I realized something important. I didn't need closure from Ethan. I didn't need revenge on Madison. All I needed was myself, the version of me that survived them both. And she was finally coming back to life. It was late October when I finally did something I never thought I would. I went back to the beach house. Not ours, not technically. It had belonged to Ethan's parents, but we used to spend long weekends there in the early years, back when things felt warm and whole and filled with laughter that wasn't laced in suspicion. I hadn't set foot there since before the affair, not since the last summer when I still believed the smiles in our photos were real. But I had the keys. His mother had always adored me and, in a twist of poetic justice, had quietly mailed them to me with a note. "You were more family than he ever knew how to be. You're welcome here, always." I drove up alone, windows down, letting the cold, salty wind whip through my hair like a purge. The moment I pulled into the gravel driveway, my heart started pounding, not from fear, but from the weight of memory. The porch swing was still creaky. The white shutters still chipped. The scent of pine and ocean still wrapped around the house like a familiar old scarf. I stood there on the front steps for a while, just breathing it in, as if by simply standing still long enough I could peel back time and find the version of me I'd lost in this very place. Inside, everything looked the same. A little dustier, maybe, but untouched. I ran my hand over the kitchen counter, the one we used to lean on while cooking together. It hit me suddenly that every room in this house held a scene from our life, a laugh, a kiss, a lie. The bedroom upstairs? That's where he first told me he wanted to grow old with me. The fire pit in the back? That's where he held my hand under a sky bursting with stars and said he couldn't imagine life without me. Turns out he could. And did. But those memories no longer shattered me. They sat quietly now, like old photographs, faded but harmless. Ghosts without fangs. I lit a fire in the fireplace and curled up on the couch with a blanket and a glass of wine. Jasper snored softly on the rug beside me. For the first time in years, I didn't feel like I was waiting for something to go wrong. There was no tightness in my chest. No dread at an unread message. No instinct to brace myself for another blow. Just quiet. Clean, whole, beautiful quiet. That night, I wrote in my journal. I used to think healing meant forgetting. Now I know it means remembering without breaking. And it was true. I hadn't forgotten what Ethan did. I hadn't forgiven it either. But I had reclaimed the parts of me he tried to shrink. I had stitched together a new version of myself, wiser, sharper, and far less willing to settle for someone who sees love as optional. Before leaving the next morning, I took one last walk down to the water. The tide was coming in, soft and rhythmic, and I let the cold kiss my toes. I closed my eyes and whispered a quiet goodbye, not just to Ethan, not just to Madison, but to the woman I used to be. The one who tolerated too much. Who gave without receiving. Who thought love meant enduring. She didn't fail. She just didn't know any better. But I do now. I walked away from that beach with salt on my skin and fire in my chest. And I knew deep down that I hadn't just survived the storm. I had become it. Winter came fast that year, as if the seasons themselves were trying to sweep away what had come before. I watched the world outside my windows turn brittle and quiet, branches bare, streets icy, the sun low and reluctant. There was something strangely comforting in it. The cold matched the part of me that was still learning how to trust warmth again. But even in that frozen stillness, life began to move. Not with grand gestures or dramatic turns, but with the tiniest, most profound shifts. I started waking up before my alarm, cooking for one and loving it, reading entire books without checking my phone, laughing, really laughing, with friends I had nearly lost touch with while I was drowning in the performance of being Ethan's wife. The world didn't stop for my heartbreak, but it didn't punish me for it either. It simply kept turning, offering me chance after chance to rebuild. One morning, while I was walking Jasper through the park, we passed a couple sitting on a bench, young, giddy, completely consumed by each other. The sight didn't hurt. I didn't feel envy. Just a quiet wonder followed by a realization that startled me. I want that again someday. Not with just anyone. Not out of fear of being alone. But real, rooted love. The kind I gave so freely to someone who didn't know what to do with it. I wanted to give it again to someone who would never treat it like an inconvenience. I wasn't ready yet. And that was okay. But acknowledging the desire meant that the wound was beginning to scar. Not disappear, scars don't do that. But seal. Harden. Mark. A reminder of survival. One evening after a particularly long day at work, I came home to find a letter in the mail. No name on the return address. Just familiar, slanted handwriting that made my breath hitch. It was from Ethan's mother. I hesitated before opening it, half expecting it to be a plea, a guilt trip, a desperate attempt to rewrite the past. But it wasn't. It was short, honest, raw in a way her son had never mastered. Rachel? I want you to know that I still think of you as my daughter. What Ethan did was unforgivable and I won't defend him. But I also won't pretend like you didn't give us the best years of your life. You were the light in this family even when we didn't deserve it. I'm sorry for everything. If you ever want to talk, I'm here. I sat with the letter in my lap, tears spilling quietly, not from pain, but from the strange, gentle comfort of being seen. Vindicated. Not everything needed to be burned to the ground. Some bridges held. Some people understood. I never replied. But I didn't throw the letter away either. I tucked it into my journal between pages full of rage and rebirth as proof that even in the aftermath of betrayal, grace still had a place. Weeks passed. Then months. And one afternoon I found myself in a coffee shop I had never been to before, laptop open, working on a freelance project that felt more like play than labor. I looked up and noticed a man sitting across the room, alone, reading, smiling to himself. He caught my eye and for a second we held that gaze. Not long. Not intense. Just enough. He nodded politely. I smiled back. And that was it. Not the beginning of something. Not yet. But maybe, just maybe, the start of something new waiting in the wings. And this time I wouldn't rush it. This time it would be on my terms. The months that followed were quiet in a way that felt sacred. Not boring. Not lonely. Just mine. I didn't rush to fill the silence. I let it stretch and settle like sunlight pouring slowly through a window after a long night. There was something holy about reclaiming my own time, waking up to a day that no longer revolved around managing someone else's moods or scanning for signs of betrayal. I didn't check Ethan's social media anymore. I didn't wonder what Madison was doing. The obsession had melted into apathy. They were ghosts now, blurred, irrelevant, drifting through a life that no longer touched mine. I filled my time with me. I signed up for a pottery class on a whim and ended up loving the feel of clay between my fingers, the way it forced me to be present. I joined a local women's hiking group even though I wasn't particularly outdoorsy. I learned to enjoy the sound of gravel under my boots, the rhythm of breathing in sync with strangers who were all, in their own way, walking away from something. There was a strange, beautiful bond between women who had once been broken. We didn't talk about details. We didn't need to. It was in our eyes, our steps, our laughter that grew freer with every mile. One Saturday afternoon after a long hike, I sat at a small brewery with some of them, cheeks pink from the cold, fingers wrapped around a hot cup of cider. One of the women, Dana, leaned over and said, "You're different now, you know that? You look lighter." I blinked, caught off guard. Lighter? She nodded. Not like weight. Like something you were carrying finally let go of you. I didn't respond right away. But the truth of it settled deep inside me like a stone at the bottom of a still lake. She was right. I wasn't dragging Ethan's choices around anymore. I wasn't measuring my worth by what he discarded. I had stopped trying to understand how he could look me in the eye while lying through his teeth. Because I finally understood that said everything about him and nothing about me. People often ask what forgiveness looks like. They expect a scene. A hug. A moment. But real forgiveness doesn't always show up with confetti and closure. Sometimes it's just the absence of hate. The absence of need. It's waking up one morning and realizing you just don't care anymore. That his name doesn't make your stomach clench. That her face doesn't make your pulse race. That their betrayal no longer commands space in your chest. I was there now, and it felt like peace. One night, while journaling, I wrote a sentence that stopped me mid-thought. I would rather be alone in truth than loved in a lie. That was it. The final line of the chapter. Not just of the marriage, but of the woman I had been inside it. That version of me, the one who apologized too much, the one who doubted her instincts, the one who begged in silence while smiling in public, she was gone now. Not erased, not forgotten. Just evolved. Grown. Forged in fire and finally cool to the touch. Spring came early that year. The world bloomed faster than expected, and for once I was ready to meet it. But just as I started to step into this new light, a message came through that stopped me cold. It wasn't Ethan. It wasn't Madison. It was someone I never expected to hear from. And what they told me changed everything again. The message arrived late past midnight when the world is quiet enough for ghosts to knock. I was curled up in bed with Jasper snoring at my feet, scrolling aimlessly through emails before sleep when I saw it. No subject line. No sender I recognized. Just a name at the bottom that pulled the air straight out of my lungs, Kimberly Hartwell. I hadn't heard that name in years. She had been Ethan's ex before me long before. They had dated in college, some messy on and off thing he never spoke much about. I'd met her once at a mutual friend's wedding. She was kind, soft-spoken, beautiful in an effortless, almost tragic way. Ethan called her a mistake from his past. I hadn't thought about her since. Until now. I opened the email, heart pounding. Hi Rachel. I know this might seem strange and I hope it doesn't come across as intrusive, but I saw what happened. A mutual friend forwarded me the Instagram post you made a while back. I've debated for weeks whether to reach out, but I think you deserve to know. You're not the only one. You were never the only one. I don't mean Madison. I mean before her. During your marriage. Ethan reached out to me 2 years ago. Told me he was in a rough place, that you didn't understand him, that he just needed a friend. I was going through my own breakup and I believed him. I was vulnerable. He made it feel like fate. We met up a few times. He swore it was harmless. That you were practically separated. I only realized later it was all lies. I'm not looking for forgiveness. I just wanted to say I'm sorry. Truly. You didn't deserve what he did to you. None of us did. Kimberly. I read it again. And again. And again. I didn't cry. I didn't throw the phone. I didn't scream. I just sat there, paralyzed, staring at the screen, stunned not by the content, but by how unsurprised I was. There it was. Another one. Another chapter of Ethan's hidden life peeled back like rotting wallpaper, exposing yet more decay beneath the polished surface. This wasn't an affair. It was a pattern. A life built on seduction, deception, control. He didn't cheat because he was in crisis. He didn't stray because he was lost. He hunted. He groomed. He sought out women at their most fragile, women who trusted him, admired him, believed the carefully constructed sob stories he fed them like honey laced with venom. And I had loved this man. I had married this man. But now the truth wasn't just illuminating. It was freeing. Because Kimberly's message confirmed what I had long suspected but never had the guts to face. Ethan was never mine. Not truly. Not the way love should be. He belonged to his sickness, his ego, his compulsion to be adored at any cost. I had been one stop along the way. One pedestal he stood on until it didn't serve him anymore. I replied to Kimberly the next morning. Thanked her for her honesty. Told her she didn't owe me an apology, but that her courage in telling the truth meant more than she could know. We exchanged a few messages over the following days. It was eerie how many details overlapped. The same phrases. The same excuses. The same patterns. It was like he was reading from a script, performing the same manipulations with different actresses in the same doomed play. But here's the thing about truth, it doesn't just reveal. It rebuilds. Because the more I learned, the less I felt like a victim, and the more I saw myself as a survivor of a man who made emotional destruction his art. I wasn't his failure. He was mine. And I would carry that lesson into every room, every relationship, every breath from now on. But the story didn't end there. Because fate, as it turns out, wasn't finished with me yet. Not even close. It happened in the most unexpected of places, an art gallery downtown I'd only wandered into because of a flyer someone had handed me outside a bookstore. I had nothing planned that afternoon, and something about the idea of being surrounded by colors, movement, meaning felt soothing. I wanted silence without sadness, expression without manipulation. I wasn't expecting anything, least of all anyone. But life has a funny way of handing you exactly what you need the moment you stop looking for it. His name was Jordan. I didn't know it at first. All I knew was that he stood beside me in front of a massive oil painting of a storm crashing against a jagged coastline and said, "Looks like heartbreak, doesn't it?" I turned to him, slightly startled, and studied his face. Not overly handsome. Not the kind of man Ethan had always tried to be: charming, rehearsed, polished. Jordan had a quiet sort of presence. Grounded. His smile didn't perform. His eyes didn't dart. And when I replied, more like survival, he didn't laugh or ask what I meant. He just nodded. Like he got it. We talked for a few minutes, nothing deep, nothing heavy. Art, books, the weather. When he asked if I'd like to grab a coffee, I hesitated. Not because I was unsure about him, but because I was unsure about me. Was I ready? Would this be a mistake? Was it too soon? Too risky? But then I remembered something I'd written in my journal just a few weeks earlier. Fear will keep you safe, but it will also keep you small. So I said yes. The coffee turned into a 2-hour conversation that flowed like a river I didn't know I'd been thirsty for. We didn't talk about exes. We didn't unpack trauma. Over the next few weeks we met again. No pressure. No expectations. Just small moments, walks through the park, long talks on public benches, coffee shops, museums, bookstores. Every time I wanted to flinch or retreat or sabotage it before it could begin, I reminded myself, I am not defined by the way someone else failed to love me. I didn't tell Jordan everything. Not yet. But I told him I'd been hurt. That I'd spent too long losing myself in someone else's chaos. And he didn't pry. He didn't press. He just said, "Then we'll go slow." And for the first time in years, slow felt safe. One evening after a quiet dinner, he reached for my hand across the table. I froze. It was the simplest gesture. The kind Ethan used to perform in public and abandon in private. But Jordan's touch wasn't performance. It was presence. No claim. No control. Just stillness and warmth. My heart beat so loud I could hear it in my ears. I didn't pull away. Because I wasn't that woman anymore. I wasn't the woman who ignored red flags, who begged for scraps, who confused intensity with intimacy. I was the woman who knew better now. Who had been through the fire and didn't come out burned, but forged. And maybe this was what healing really looked like. Not forgetting. Not forgiving the unforgivable. But choosing softness again even when the world had tried to harden you. It was strange, the way healing crept in, not like a sunrise, sudden and glorious, but like fog lifting inch by inch, almost imperceptibly. One morning I woke up and realized I hadn't thought about Ethan in days. Not with anger. Not with pain. Just, not at all. He no longer sat in the corners of my mind like a stain I couldn't scrub out. His voice didn't echo through my quiet moments. His shadow didn't loom behind every new interaction. I wasn't free of what he'd done, but I was finally free of him. I noticed the shift in my body first. I stood taller, breathed deeper, laughed louder, real, belly-deep laughter that shook off the stiffness I didn't even know I was carrying. I moved through my days without apology, without the weight of wondering if I was being too much or not enough, without adjusting my volume, my tone, my opinions to keep a man comfortable. For the first time in years, I didn't feel like I had to shrink to be loved. Jordan and I had been seeing each other more regularly. Always slowly, carefully. He never pushed, never assumed. He showed up like clockwork, not with grand gestures or poetic lines, but with consistency. When I told him I needed space, he gave it. When I said I was afraid, he didn't promise it would be different. He just listened. And that quiet kind of listening, the kind that doesn't rush to fix, doesn't try to dominate the silence, that was new. Healing. Disarming in the best way. But even in this newfound calm, I wasn't naive. Trauma has a way of sneaking up on you when you least expect it. And one afternoon, standing in line at the grocery store, I saw a couple laughing over a bottle of wine, the same brand Ethan and I used to drink on our date nights. And just like that, the world tilted. My throat tightened. My palms went clammy. I could still remember the first night Ethan opened that bottle and said, "This one's for special occasions." I believed him. Believed in us. But now I understood that even back then there had been cracks. And there was one memory, just one, that had haunted me in silence, begging to be revisited. It was a night years ago. Before Madison. Before the unraveling. I had found a text on his phone. A flirty message from a number with no name attached. Nothing explicit, just enough to raise a question in my gut. I asked him about it. He laughed. "It's just a friend from work," he said. "She's always like that. It's harmless." And I'd let it go. I hadn't wanted to seem jealous. I hadn't wanted to start a fight. But I knew. I knew even then that something was wrong. And instead of listening to myself, I listened to him. That was my first betrayal, not his. Mine. The betrayal of my own instincts. Of the voice that said, this doesn't feel right. This isn't love. This isn't safe. I went home that night and sat in front of my mirror for a long time. Not crying. Not unraveling. Just remembering. And then I wrote 3 words on a sticky note and placed it where I would see it every morning. Never again, Rachel. Never again will I doubt myself to protect someone else's lie. Never again will I barter my peace for proximity. Never again will I confuse silence for stability or manipulation for passion. I had loved a man who fed on my silence. Now I was learning to love myself loudly. With that sticky note staring back at me each morning, I began to move through the world like a woman returning home to herself. Every habit, every choice, every tiny decision became a quiet rebellion against who I had been in that marriage. I no longer asked for permission to feel. I didn't apologize for setting boundaries. I didn't second-guess myself when something didn't feel right. I simply listened to my gut, my breath, my heartbeat. To the version of me that had been screaming beneath the surface all those years, begging to be heard. And now, finally, she was driving the car. I started saying no more often. No to people who drained me. No to things I once did out of guilt or obligation. And surprisingly, the world didn't fall apart when I stopped people-pleasing. In fact, it got quieter. More honest. The right people stayed. The wrong ones drifted away. And I realized that most of the love I thought I had in my life had been conditional, transactional. Ethan had trained me to perform for affection, to mold myself into a shape that would earn his approval. I was done with that. Jordan saw the change too. One evening, while we were cooking dinner together, he paused mid-sentence, looked at me, and said, "You're different lately. Stronger. Not harder, just more you." I didn't know how to respond at first. The compliment felt foreign, like wearing a jacket that hadn't fit in years. But when I looked into his eyes and saw there was no hidden agenda, no expectation, just genuine admiration, I finally allowed myself to believe it. Maybe I was different. Not broken. Not jaded. Just rebuilt. That night, as we sat on the couch watching a documentary, I told him about the sticky note. About the text message years ago. About the moment I knew something was wrong but buried it because I didn't want to lose a man who was already gone. He didn't interrupt. Didn't rush to reassure me. He just took my hand and held it the way someone does when they know silence is safer than any word they could offer. I didn't need to be rescued. I just needed to be witnessed. And for the first time, I realized that maybe healing isn't about forgetting the red flags or pretending they never existed. Maybe it's about learning to honor the woman who finally started running when she saw them instead of making excuses. Maybe healing is just remembering clearly, unapologetically, and choosing differently the next time. Later, I stood in front of the mirror and looked at myself for a long time. My reflection didn't flinch. She didn't search for flaws. She didn't wonder if she was too much or not enough. She looked whole. She looked free. I traced the edge of my collarbone, once a spot Ethan used to kiss with false tenderness, and I whispered to my reflection, "I'm proud of you." Because I was. Not for surviving what he did, but for refusing to let it define me. Not for walking away, but for staying gone. And not for moving on with someone new, but for coming back home to myself before I did. The past still lived inside me, but it no longer controlled me. And I was finally ready for what came next. Whatever it looked like. Spring settled in for real, and with it came the kind of quiet renewal I hadn't dared to hope for. Not the cinematic kind with dramatic makeovers or declarations of freedom on rooftops, but something softer. More real. I planted herbs on my windowsill. I started running in the mornings, slow and steady, not to punish my body, but to feel it again. I reconnected with old friends, ones I had unintentionally pushed away while orbiting around Ethan's chaos. Some of them cried when I told them the truth. Not because of what I'd been through, but because they hadn't known how far I'd disappeared inside it. They said they were glad I came back. And I was too. I wasn't returning as the woman I used to be. I was coming home wiser, louder, sharper, and softer in the places that mattered. One Saturday, while reorganizing the storage closet, I found a dusty old photo album. Our wedding. I hadn't seen it since I threw it in the back of that closet after he left. My fingers hesitated over the cover, and for a moment I considered tossing it straight in the trash. But something made me open it. I flipped through the pages slowly, my eyes scanning every fake smile, every staged embrace. It was like watching 2 actors who didn't know they were on a sinking ship. The weight of it hit me, not the pain, not the betrayal, but the illusion. How much I had convinced myself it was real. How much I had ignored in the name of loyalty, of duty, of not giving up too soon. And then I saw one photo that stopped me. It wasn't of Ethan. It was of me. Sitting alone at the reception table, chin in hand, eyes cast downward. There was no one near me. No laughter. No sparkle. Just me, surrounded by noise and people and lights, and yet, clearly, unmistakably alone. I stared at that photo for a long time. Then I tore it out and pinned it to my vision board. Not as a warning, but as a promise. A vow to myself, never again would I sit at a table I had to beg to be noticed at. Never again would I romanticize a love that left me empty in rooms full of celebration. I would rather eat alone in peace than dine beside someone who made me feel invisible. That same evening, Jordan came over with takeout. We sat on the floor, eating noodles out of paper boxes, laughing about how badly I had burned dinner the last time I tried to impress him. At some point, I told him about the photo. I showed it to him. He studied it carefully, then looked up at me with something deeper than sympathy in his eyes. "You don't look like that anymore," he said softly. "Not even when you're quiet." I didn't respond. I didn't need to. The truth had landed. Not in my chest like a wound, but like a seed. After he left, I went to the bathroom, took off my makeup, tied my hair up, and looked at myself in the mirror. Same face. Same features. But a different woman entirely. A woman who no longer contorted herself for someone else's comfort. A woman who didn't need to be rescued, completed, or chosen. She had already chosen herself. And that made all the difference. One more part of the story remained. One final thread to tie off. Not for Ethan. Not for closure. For me. It was raining the day I went to see him. Not a dramatic thunderstorm, not cinematic. Just a steady, cold drizzle that soaked the streets and made the world feel heavy with silence. I hadn't planned it, hadn't circled the date on a calendar or built it up in my mind. It just felt like time. Not to forgive. Not to reconcile. But to close the loop fully, finally, so there would be no more echo of him in the chambers of my healing. Ethan had moved to a small apartment on the other side of town. I hadn't seen him in months. His mother had mentioned in a brief letter that he was not doing well, but I'd never asked for details. I didn't care about his consequences. I cared about my clarity. When he opened the door, I almost didn't recognize him. He looked older, smaller, like the weight of his choices had finally settled onto his shoulders and hadn't been lifted since. He blinked at me like I was a memory come to life, then stepped aside. I didn't say thank you. I didn't say anything. I just walked in and stood in the center of the room. It was plain. Empty almost. No warmth. No life. A perfect reflection of the man who used to share my bed. "I didn't expect you," he said after a long pause. "I didn't come for you," I replied, my voice calm. Steady. "I came for me." He nodded slowly, unsure of what to do with the version of me that stood before him now. The woman who didn't need answers. Who didn't flinch. Who wasn't here for a breakdown or a breakthrough. "I don't know what to say," he mumbled. "You said enough," I answered. "And so did I. But there's one thing I haven't told you. And it's not for your sake, it's for mine." He looked up at me then, eyes tired, face gone. "I forgive you," I said quietly. Not because he deserved it. Not because he earned it. But because I was done carrying him. "I forgive you," I repeated, "for lying. For cheating. For gaslighting me into silence. For making me question my worth. For dragging my name through the dirt to justify what you did with her and with others. I forgive you for every night I cried alone in a house I helped build. For every time I swallowed my instincts to keep the peace. For every time I traded honesty for survival. But most of all, I forgive you for making me think that love was supposed to hurt." He opened his mouth to speak, but I held up a hand. "I don't need anything from you. No apology. No explanation. This isn't about closure. This is about release." And with that, I turned and walked out. Down the stairs. Out into the rain. It fell on my skin like baptism. Every drop a cleansing. Every step a reclamation. I got in my car, started the engine, and didn't look back once. Not at the building. Not at the past. Not at the man who once convinced me that being loved meant being less. As I drove home, something inside me shifted. Not a dramatic transformation. Just a quiet, unshakable knowing. I had made it through the fire. And I didn't just survive. I became the damn flame. Let that be the story they remember. Not the cheating. Not the betrayal. But the woman who rose from the wreckage and built herself from ash.